Good morning and welcome to another Fast Tracks webinar. This is a weekly event we do every Friday at 9 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Eastern, where we'll cover various aspects of the Fast Track software. You can see these events if you go to our website, goftx.com, choose the FTx Lifeline tab at the top of the screen, scroll down about halfway down the page, choose that webinar button, and this will allow you to see all of our previous webinars, which has the view recording button, and you can view those recordings at any time. Sign up for new webinars. At the bottom of the page, there's a register now. That way you'll be reminded whenever these webinars are about to go live. And also sign up for the newsletter. This will get you product news and also webinar reminders via email. This week, we're going to be going over utilizing suggested transfers. Suggested transfers is a fantastic way to monitor your sales and your inventory levels and transfer items at one location that may not be moving and you have excess inventory in to another location where you have movement occurring and you need that inventory because you're going to be ordering that anyway. If one location is not moving that and one location is, and one location needs inventory and the other doesn't, then you're effectively just sitting on money at that location that it doesn't have the sales. This is a great way to help move those products to the location where you're not going to be sitting on that money. So to look at this, we're going to go to our corporate mode real fast in Director. And we'll open that up. And we're first going to go over the transfer process, how transfers work in general, since we're doing this from a corporate environment. So I'm going to go to the inventory module. You need to first make sure that you have permission to view the inventory module and create transfers. And the way transfers are going to work from corporate is you create the transfer and you choose a from store and a to store. So I could say like from store 1 to store 2. I can input a memo if I'd like. And then you have a worksheet. And on this worksheet, you key in items that you like to transfer, the quantity you'd like to transfer. It'll automatically pull up the last cost. And then whenever you are done keying that in, whenever you apply that transfer, it's going to then send that transfer down to both locations, update both locations' inventory, and then send that back to corporate. And that's whenever corporate's going to see that movement has occurred. That's how the transfer process would work. So you first create it, you apply it, the stores receive it, update their inventories, and then it gets sent back to corporate for corporate to view. So, suggested transfers. Once you see the worksheet, it's actually very simple. To get to that, you just simply choose the Suggested Transfer tab at the top of the screen. This screen has a couple options that we're going to go over. You first can analyze, you choose the store you want to analyze. So I can choose any of the stores that I have that are active. You then want to look up items. And there's other filter options as well. So I can key in an individual UPC here, or I can use that find and bring up a search box and search for that UPC. But in my mind, it's more efficient to look at more items than one at a time. So there's other filter options, this hyperlink here. And I can choose a department, a category, manufacturer, report groups. There's a wide variety of filters I can utilize to actually use to analyze those items. So I'm going to look at my shoe department right now. I'm going to add that to the selected departments list and save. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to look at the start date and the stop date. This is going to be the time frame that you're analyzing for the sales data. So I'm going to look at 1 month. I'm going to look at the 10th of April to the 10th of May, which is today. Then you have the minimum sales threshold. What this does is it's going to say, okay, an item for it to populate on this list down here in this worksheet, it has to have not sold at least 5. So in this case, I want to see less than that. I want to put that to 1. I want to see, basically show me items that have not sold, at least 1. I'm going to leave the option to roll up links. And then there's evaluation options. I can choose between 3 different formats. The format quantity on hand, to sales, your quantity on hand to average sales per day, and your quantity on hand to average sales per week. I'm going to go to the quantity on hand to average sales, or the quantity on hand to sales. So I'm then going to analyze that. The system then goes through and it's looking at each item in that filter, in this case, that shoe department. It's getting the sales data for 1 month's time period, and then it's going to populate items on this list down here that have not sold at least one in that 1 month period. So this is almost done now. And notice you have the individual items on this left-hand column here. And you have your link type. Is it linked at all? If it is, it'll have a parent or a child. You have your quantity on hand and the quantity sold. Now these values are going to be coming from the from transfer store. So in this case, I'm looking at store 1 in that dropdown. So this is going to be items that have not sold at least one in the store 1 in that 1 month period. I can see here, if I go past that quantity sold and that link quantity, then I have the store 2 info and the store 3 info. What this is saying is this evaluation option, that quantity on hand to sales, that's what you're seeing here. I'm seeing that I have 6 on hand at store 2 and I sold 3 in that time period. At store 3 on this item, I have 8 on hand and I sold 0 in that time period. So what it's saying is it's going to highlight store 2 here in this scenario, yellow, and it's going to suggest that I transfer inventory from store 1 to store 2, not store 3. Store 3 is not highlighted. So you can see that it's suggesting it's going to automatically put in what I have on hand at store 1, suggesting that goes to store 2. I may not want to move all of store 1's inventory to store 2. I may want to keep some just in case I actually need that product. So in this case, I'm going to put 2 there. We can go to the next item, and we can see that I have 5 on hand at store 1. I had 0 sales. Store 2 has 4 on hand, and it sold 1 in that time period. Store 3 has 8, and it sold 0. Once again, store 2 is highlighted. So then I can choose how many I'd like to transfer there. By default, it's filling out 5. I'm going to put 2 in there as well. Now, if there's a link involved, such as this Grizzly Mint, we can see that it's the parent UPC. We can see that store 1 has 1 on hand. It sold 0. Store 2 has 2 on hand, and in this past month it sold 2.4. That means it sold 2 of the purchase units and 0.4 of the subunits, or 0.4 of a purchase unit, which would be selling the subunits. Store 3, once again, it has some on hand, it didn't sell anything. So the system is going to suggest that I transfer to store 2. There's that value. I can leave that at 1, or I can, because I only have 1 on hand, or I can put that to 0. So you go down the row and you can do this and see this for every item. And remember, all these items in this list are at store 1 and items that did not sell at least 1 in that time period, because that's the parameters I input. So if I'd like to keep this data and create that transfer for both stores, because see, here's an example where store 1 is being suggested to transfer this skull to store 3. Store 2 has some on hand but didn't sell anything. Store 3 has some on hand and did sell some. So it's going to suggest that I transfer to store 3. I can choose, if I want to make both transfers, I can choose the create all transfers. That's going to go through and create a transfer for store 2 and for store 3 from store 1. It'll be 2 separate transfers. If I only want to create the transfer for store 2, then I can choose the drop down here, store 2, create transfers, and that will then create the transfer for store 2. So I'm going to have the prompt here. I'm going to create the transfers. I'm going to choose yes. That's going to create the transfer. So we're going to go back now to the transfers screen. I'm going to refresh the screen, and then there's a new transfer. I can view that transfer, and it's the same worksheet we had saw a little bit ago, as if I manually keyed all those in. I have all the items that was on that worksheet that were suggested to be transferred to store 2. There's the quantity, there's the cost. So if I apply this now, that would then send this transfer down to store 1 and store 2, update both inventories. The system would then send that back to corporate, and then corporate would then see that item movement occurring. It's a very simple process that makes a lot of sense to use because, once again, if you have product at one location and it's not moving, and you have that same product at another location and it is moving, you're more than likely going to be ordering that product anyway. Why just sit on that product at the location where it's not moving, effectively sitting on money where you're going to be spending that money to buy that product anyway? It just makes sense to move that. Maybe not move all of it in case you have a sale at that location that isn't selling it, but you may want to move some of it because you don't want to go out of stock and you're going to be ordering it anyway. So just look at that worksheet once more. We're going to go back here. Let's look at a different department. Let's say I want to look at, instead of my chew department, I want to look at my major pack and major carton department. I can choose both of those departments, add, save that. Let's say I want to look at, instead of a whole month, I want to look at just 2 weeks. I can go back to the 26th, show me everything that hasn't sold at least one, and then analyze. The system will then go through and do the exact same thing. It's going to analyze every item in those 2 departments this time, and then populate this worksheet based on items that have not sold in the past 2 weeks, at least one. Once it's done adding these items in place, you'll then have the quantities. It's got to go through and evaluate. You see where it's evaluating 49 out of 51 out of 260 now. Once it's done evaluating all of those items, it's then going to populate that number on each highlighted store, that suggested transfer. So we're going to let this finish, which will take just a moment. We can already see here that there's child items and there's parent items here. Anytime there's a parent item, there's going to be potentially a decimal involved, because you can have a partial, that the parent and the child, since it's being rolled up, you'll see that partial value there. You could have sold 1.5 parent units. In this case, for these departments, that would be a carton and 5 packs. All right, so this is almost done. And we can see that there's going to be values for both stores that is suggesting being transferred. Store 2 and store 3. Notice those values that actually would be transferred if we want to create the transfer from this worksheet. There is 0. Those get populated at the very end once you get the prompt saying that it's complete. All right, there's just 30 items left. And 5 items left. And here we're going to get that message. Finished analyzing data, and then notice all those numbers are now populated. When you see that in that message box, then you can start actually updating the numbers here. So if I wanted to go through this worksheet and then change those values, because notice everything here, since I have that set to a value of 1, it has to have sold at least 1 full purchase unit. So we can see here that I sold, in this scenario, since we're rolling up, it's a carton. I sold 0.2 of that carton. That means in this 2-week period, I only sold 2 packs. 1.9, that means I have 1 carton and 9 packs on hand. So whenever you're transferring, you can also use that number as well. I can transfer 1.9 cartons, which would be 1 carton and 9 packs. This is a fantastic tool to use, and it's just a great way to get a good top-down view of your inventory, your movement, and where it'd be best to allocate that inventory. All right, so that's what I had for us today. I hope everybody learned something and will use this amazing tool. Once again, if you need to sign up for these webinars, you can go to our website, goftx.com, choose that FTX Lifeline tab at the top of the screen, scroll down, choose the webinar button, and the screen will allow you to sign up for the newsletter, to be reminded of webinars and other product news. It will allow you to see all the previous webinars that we've done, as well as sign up for the upcoming webinars. If you have any suggestions or feedback on webinars you'd like to see, let us know at info@goftx.com. And if you have any questions, let us know at websupport@FTxPOS.com or 256-319-3470. Thank you very much for your time, and we hope you have a great weekend.